Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Michelle here from happyhealthyher.com. In this week's Compassionate Chat, we're going to be talking about the dangers of gratitude. It probably sounds like a little bit of a scary topic, but I promise you it's not meant to be frightening or negative in any way. It's actually meant to empower you and to see sort of a different side of what we often consider to be a solely positive aspect. I think it's important to understand that everything has a shadow side in our world, and gratitude has its own shadow side. It can actually trap us sometimes in negative situations or keep us from seeing the truth of a connection. I want to start out though by saying gratitude as a practice has literally been life-changing for me. In all of my darkest, hardest times, gratitude has helped lift me up. It's helped to raise my vibration. It's helped me to find joy and appreciation for all the good in my life. In fact, in my free guide, 33 Ways to Add More Joy to Your Life, which I will link below, you can get a free copy. Gratitude is a big piece of the joy activities that I find in my day-to-day life. So in the grand scheme of things, gratitude is incredible. It can raise your vibration and it can actually enhance your life tremendously. But there is, like I said, a dark side. And as I am in the process of recovering from years of narcissistic abuse and codependency and unhealthy people-pleasing, I have had to accept that despite how powerful and uplifting gratitude is meant to be for us, it can also be dangerous if we are not able to see all aspects of it. We will actually sometimes find ourselves in toxic gratitude, which, similar to toxic positivity, actually shifts us out of alignment, and it causes us to sometimes be in abusive or manipulative situations. So what I'm talking about in this particular compassionate chat is something I actually addressed in a blog from 2023. I'm going to link to that below. And in that blog, I talk about 4 principles. And in addition, I'm going to, in the chat, actually give you some practical tools to recognize toxic gratitude and also to create more healthy gratitude in your life and your relationships. So please stick with me. I hope this is going to give you some really practical tools, as usual, to help you live better in mind, body, and spirit, and just to navigate, again, some of the harder things of life. So to start off, we will say that I can say that gratitude can be blinding. Many times we are so busy looking for the good in a situation, the quote-unquote silver lining, that we completely miss and disregard all the negative aspects. I think many of us who are optimistic, and empaths tend to be quite optimistic, codependents as well can be quite optimistic, but even just people who are conscientious are often optimistic and want to see the good in everything. And so we want so badly to see that and attract that we are completely blinded to negativity and people who are taking advantage of us. The key is to be able to detach from a situation so that we can see it clearly. So in the last video, I talked about using a pros and cons list in deciding whether you wanted to leave a situation. What I didn't really necessarily stress is that it's really important that you not get blinded by your own gratitude and your own desires, because many times we don't want to leave a relationship. And so we're automatically skewed to seeing the best in that relationship. It's much easier many times to just stay in a relationship. So your pros and cons list could end up being skewed because of that. So the key really is to try to detach and really see things objectively, like actually detail specific incidences with a person or with a situation, so that you can see, is this something I should be grateful for, or is this something that really is a negative in my life? The second principle is that gratitude can be bonding. And this is probably the most complicated area of this topic. When we are in toxic or manipulative relationships, the gratitude we have for simply having that relationship or for that connection literally bonds us to the person. And it's not logical. So like oftentimes when you see an abusive situation, an outsider would say, how did they even get into that situation? Or why do they even put up with that person? They can't recognize why someone might allow for a cruel or manipulative or a narcissistic person to take advantage of them. But the answer, unfortunately, is a psychological concept called trauma bonding. And frequently, we get bonded to people who are traumatizing us. It does not make logical sense to an outsider, but it's actually our brain's way of protecting us in sort of what seems like a twisted phenomenon. But really, what actually happens in trauma bonding is that the person gets so confused, fearful, and even they feel powerless due to the abuse that they're under, that they can't see the reality, and instead they actually start to feel sympathy and even gratitude for their abusers. So, I mean, one of the hallmarks of abuse is that there's usually put downs, there's very subtle insults, and so it happens over time, and before you know it, you're actually believing what the abuser is telling you, that you're no good, that no one will ever love you, that you're useless, or whatever they're saying. And so you start to think, oh my gosh, I'm so lucky to have this person in my life, because man, I'm a terrible person. Obviously that is not true, but they've gotten into your head, and it's very hard to recognize when this is happening to you, especially when you're in a romantic partnership or even a family partnership where that person is supposed to love you. And maybe they're even telling you they love you. And so it's very confusing. You're like, wait a minute, if they love me, then why are they harming me? I must be wrong. I must be seeing this wrong. And so you almost like double down on the relationship and start to feel gratitude for someone who's actually treating you terribly. It's just a really, really challenging situation, especially since frequently people who are abusing us are sprinkling in little bits of kindness. They're sprinkling in little pieces of things that we can be grateful for, even though they're just crumbs. They're barely even the bare minimum of what a healthy relationship is. But it's hard for us to see it because it's being peppered in amongst the abuse, and so it starts to feel normal. So I am not an expert on trauma bonding, honestly. I want to make that really clear. But I have lived it. And so I know what it feels like, and it's much harder to actually explain. But the best explanation that I've seen for it, and what they often use in terms of psychological terms, is a hostage situation. That is when you're very likely to see a trauma bonding situation play out right in front of your face. So we see these in movies, of course, the hostage situation where a gunman comes into a bank, let's say, and holds people hostage. And what inevitably happens to some of those people is that their fear response is so great. They know they're potentially going to die, and that this person could kill them. And so that's almost like a switch goes off, where instead of them seeing that their life would not even be under threat if it wasn't for this terrible person. What they disregard that piece, and they recognize that I'm still alive, although I could have easily been killed. So they switch toward gratitude toward this person who is really harming them. And because really, they are grateful many times that the person has not killed them. And so there have been instances where people who were held hostage actually defend their captors, or they have so much pity and empathy for them that they don't want them to be put in prison or otherwise harmed. It's really strange phenomenon, but it's actually a protective mechanism of the brain where you recognize that this person has done some good to theoretically save your life, and you're disregarding all the other pieces, all the hard pieces. The same is true even with a parental relationship. Children are incredibly indebted to their parents. Meaning that, children need their parents for survival. That's what I mean by indebted. I'm not meaning that if you are a child, you owe your parents anything. You honestly really don't. You didn't ask to be born. Parents take on that role. So many of us, though, do believe that we owe our parents for raising us or for doing all the things that they did to keep us alive. That is a bit of trauma bonding. We know intuitively that they kept us alive, and so there's just this great sense of gratitude toward this person. But oftentimes that can get skewed, especially if the relationship was in any way abusive or challenging or neglectful. Then the child really doesn't have that kind of obligation to feel the gratitude. And in fact, more likely than not, they shouldn't feel gratitude at all because this person gave them the bare minimum. But our brains don't work that way many times. And if you are a deeply empathetic person, your body doesn't really work that way either. Empaths tend to sense other people's emotions, and when another person feels bad, an empath tends to feel bad. And so all we want to do is have the situation feel good. We want everybody to feel good. And so we're prone to shift that in any way we can. And if it's showing gratitude toward the person, well, then so be it. We will do that just to try to placate and make things right. But that does not mean that that is healthiest for us. And so that's where that awareness shift is really important. So the third piece is that gratitude can create unhealthy expectations. This is pretty common. So for a manipulator, will often hijack a person's gratitude or their sense of appreciation. In addition, they will use the debilitating powers of guilt and shame to get people to do things for them. So a great example of this is like a boss or your partner or a family member saying, after everything I have done for you, you're not going to do this little request I have of you, whatever it is. And chances are it's not a little request. But they're basically shaming you that, how dare you not do this thing I want you to do? Because I've done these things for you. So it becomes like this tit for tat relationship where it's like, you will feel guilty many times of, oh my gosh, they're right, I owe them. When in reality, you don't really owe them, because whatever it is they probably did for you, more than likely you didn't ask for it. Or it's not at the same magnitude of the request they're putting in. So like I have had situations where a boss has said, yeah, I want to give you a promotion. You're working so hard. You've done so much great work. And then you're told, okay, oh, yay, I'm going to get some more money. I earned this. And then you get the promotion, and then all of a sudden they're like asking for a whole bunch of more things to add to your work responsibilities. And it's like, wait, I was already maxed out. I thought the promotion was to compensate for how much I had been overworking already. And now they're kind of dangling it over you like a carrot, like, well, I gave you this thing and now you owe me a ton more work, which is not a fair ask. And so many times, if you are the type of person who is really grateful for things and wanting to show your gratitude, you're going to try to jump to placate this person in ways that oftentimes are unfair for you and will likely lead you to not feel well and to be out of balance. So the fourth and final point is that gratitude can ultimately lead to negativity. So like in the last scenario, for sure, you could probably already tell that I was leaning toward negativity in that scenario. If someone has manipulated you to be grateful and to be reciprocal, that feels terrible. In addition, like if we are overgiving and overcompensating, either out of our own desire to be grateful or out of a desire to gain the gratitude or praise of another person, either scenario, if it's out of alignment or it's not reciprocal, it's ultimately going to lead to resentment. I mean, this is one of the hardest things for codependents to deal with is codependents are often people-pleasing and overgiving and disregarding their own needs and emotions, only to suddenly realize that they're completely burnt out, they're energetically wiped, they're really sad and depressed because no one else is actually showing up or showing appreciation or even giving you any type of reciprocation. So you feel like you've wasted your energy and time on a person if you're trying to do all these great things for them and they're not even appreciating you or even acknowledging it. So again, empaths as well will have this happen where an empath will tend to be very service oriented and be giving to all their relationships and be really proactive and positive in their connections. And suddenly they'll realize that, oh my gosh, years have gone by and I've been giving to all these different people, and maybe you hit a wall and you're like, I actually need some help, and nobody's around, nobody shows up for you, nobody's willing to help you. And then you realize, oh my gosh, I've been doing all these things and no one is even grateful for me and no one is reciprocating. So it ultimately ends up being a negative situation where you're really depleted, you're really disappointed. It's incredibly disheartening to realize you've been sort of investing into relationships that were not actually investing in you. And that your gratitude for a connection with someone may have trapped you in a negative, draining scenario. So I just want to go over some examples of toxic gratitude, how this happens, how we actually exhibit this in like the day-to-day. So one is excusing negative, manipulative, or unkind behavior just to see the positive in the connection. So we talked about this in terms of the blinding scenario, but you're just constantly looking at the bright side. And it means you are overlooking all of the negative aspects of the relationship. We have to be able to detach and see things objectively. Another scenario would be, and this is super common, and I have done this, and I know tons of people who do this, and this is staying at a toxic job because the pay and the benefits are good. You kind of just tell yourself, this is good enough. I'm going to stay here for the long haul. I'm going to stay here till I retire. I'm just going to stick it out. I mentioned this in our last video when we talked about leaving, but this is a very common thing. It's hard to leave a job because there's always pros, and one of the pros tends to be the stability of a salary and the stability of benefits. But if you're grateful for those things, that can become toxic if the environment is otherwise draining you and is otherwise not healthy for you. You have to be able to see the big picture of a scenario. Another example of toxic gratitude would be overextending yourself in any capacity, financially, energetically, emotionally, in order to pay back someone for their efforts. This is sort of the tendency of someone who really is conscientious. You're constantly wanting to be paying back and paying your fair share. But the reality is, frequently, that's not necessary. And frequently, the only people who want you to pay them back are people who are manipulating them. People who really love you and are giving to you from their heart, they're not expecting you to pay them back. So just understand that that desire can feed into toxicity. Another example would be suppressing your voice and not sharing your feelings just to avoid looking ungrateful. This is, if you suppress your emotions, we've talked about this in the video about anger. If you ever suppress your emotions, they are ultimately going to get magnified. And so you will get illness, anxiety, depression, digestive problems. If you are stuffing down your feelings and not sharing them with another person, you will ultimately end up with poor health. You need to be able to speak your truth and let your energy and your emotions flow freely. So say you have a scenario where your partner gives you a crappy gift. And I had this when I was married. Really crappy gifts. And this is very much what covert narcissists do. They try to tell us that we're not important to us in a multitude of ways, and one of the ways is through their gift giving, and they will give really crappy gifts. So my second birthday. The first birthday I was with my now ex, he gave me fantastic gifts. The first birthday, he was still love bombing me. Second birthday, we had moved in together. He already had me. He felt like I don't need to give her anything. So he literally worked above a dollar store. I swear he must have gone down on his lunch break, bought a dollar store purple unscented candle. We lived together, so he knew there was not a stitch of purple in our house. That was not even a color like I really like very much. But he got me an unscented purple candle. I mean, it was just the worst gift. But I didn't say anything to him because in my mind I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you're so ungrateful. Maybe he didn't know any better. Maybe he was rushed. Maybe he didn't have the money. But I knew none of those things were true. None of those things were true. I lived with him. He knew me well enough. I knew him well enough. And I don't really understand to this day why I wouldn't be clearer, but maybe because I realized if I called him out, things would have ended, and I was too afraid to end things. You honestly can't be afraid to end things, because things that are going to end because you've voiced a concern about them or because you've told someone a gift they've given you is not quite your style or your taste, if a relationship ends for that, it was never a healthy relationship to begin with. So you do want to make sure that you voice yourself. And the final piece of example of toxic gratitude is that you tell yourself you're lucky or you're grateful for a relationship when you really don't feel that way. Now, I have done this a million times, and I think a lot of people do this because it's great to have friends. I mean, let's face it. It's nice to have friends. Many of us feel like the more the better. I now no longer feel that way. I have a very small, very close set of friends. I'm not more is better, because what I've learned is that the more people you're connecting with, many times the more people who are taking from you, and the less genuine your relationships are. And so being grateful for genuinely invested relationships is never going to be toxic. It's highly beneficial. But being grateful for connections with people who are takers and are using and abusing and manipulating and not really valuing you is not a good use of your energy. And what ultimately happens is that when we lie to ourselves in that way, our body starts to fight back. Because you're never able to really lie to yourself. You know at your core what you believe and what is true for you. And so telling yourself you should be grateful for something that really isn't worthy of your gratitude is ultimately going to backfire on you, and that relationship is likely to end badly. So be honest and sever your connections as best as you can with relationships where you don't feel a true connection and you don't have a genuine gratitude for them in your life. So how can we actually nurture healthy gratitude? The first answer is the answer really of all good health, and that is balance. Everything in life requires balance, and health in particular requires a balance, especially energetically. So with in terms of balancing in a relationship, you want to have equal give and receive. You want to be giving and receiving with some level of reciprocity. Now, I said equal. It's never really going to be equal, but the intention needs to be there. And so you look for relationships where people are actually putting in the time, the same amount of effort and time that you are. You also want to be able to see both sides of a situation. So we already mentioned this with the pros and cons list. And I really do stress, you got to pull yourself out. You got to pull out your biases. You have to be able to look at a situation with objectivity. Is this relationship really beneficial for me? Is there a true give and take? Is there mutual respect and love? If there isn't, then you really don't want it. You should not be feeling gratitude toward that scenario. And you really only want to give when it feels good. If giving doesn't actually feel good because you feel like you're being manipulated to do it, or you're giving to someone who never appreciates you, that is going to ultimately feel absolutely terrible. And it's not a fair exchange at all. And so you have to constantly be reminding yourself that giving is about, there's a joy to giving. There should be a natural joy to giving. It's not just about a give and a take. It's not just about that. It's much bigger than that. You want to be able to be happy about the level of giving you're giving and not feel resentful for it. Another point around healthy gratitude is voicing your needs in clear and direct communication. I'm probably going to do a whole other chat on this because it is so important, but also so hard. It's very, very hard to have what I call courageous communication, where you're honoring yourself and you're truly telling other people what you need and you want. But in the connections that really matter to you, that kind of communication is essential. So if you're finding your relationship is getting skewed, or you're feeling like a friend is not showing you gratitude, or that you're starting to feel like you're not feeling gratitude for a connection, you want to try to nip that in the bud early. You want to try to talk to the person about it and figure out how you can get into closer alignment with each other. And then finally, this is a biggie too, it's super, super important. You have to recognize the takers. All right? There's people in this world who are just takers. They're manipulating other people to get things, to do things, to do things for them, to give them things. See these people for who they really are. And do not get trapped with some sort of level of appreciation for them, or in a desire to maintain like a tit for tat or any of that. No, see them as who they are. See manipulative situations for what they are. Try not to question them or second guess them, because you know at your core better than anyone else. And also be able to realize charm when you see it. There's people who are very charismatic and will use your gratitude, again, against you so that they can get what you want. You need to be able to spot those people and sort of weed them from your lives so you can protect yourself from being drained. Only then can you really have healthy gratitude grow. So I hope this didn't come across too negative. I certainly don't want that. I really want to protect you. I want to make sure that you're as healthy as you possibly can be, and having a healthy balance of gratitude is an essential component of that. As always, if you liked this video, if you got anything from it, please hit the thumbs up. And if you are interested in this kind of content, please go ahead and subscribe, share it with your friends if you feel that would be helpful to them. Either way, I so appreciate you being here with me. And as always, I wish you happiness and good health. Thanks again.